Dear colleagues, dear friends, my name is Màrius Martínez. I'm the Vice-Rector for International Relations at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and it is my pleasure to open this third session on reshaping the dialogue with contemporary African worlds, jointly organized by the Alianza Cuatro Universidades, A4U, and with the support of ISEX and our teams of international relations and the technical support from Fundación Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. I have to apologize to the rector, who could not change previous arrangements in his agenda, but he will be closing this session at the end of the event. As most of you know, Alianza Cuatro Universidades is a strategic alliance of 4 top universities in Spain, with a very international profile and very strong in research. We are research-intensive universities with a very international profile. And we have set a shared international strategy focused now in Africa and its universities. We have started a series of direct missions to African countries, meeting our university colleagues and exploring and implementing new collaborations of mutual interest. Now, with the pandemic, we have added this new activity. This format will help us to learn and to work together and to contribute to our common interests. In the recent past weeks, we have been reflecting on and learning around 2 important aspects, which were African Women on the Move, organized by Universidad Carlos III in Madrid, and a second debate on what Africa can tell us about migration, organized by the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. Today's session is focused in one of the most challenging and threatening issues, especially affecting the entire vulnerable communities in Africa, but also around the world, which is the climate crisis and the food insecurity. These topics require much more attention than it has been given until now, and the experts that will share their ideas, thoughts, and researchers today with us will reflect on this complexity. I am sure we are going to learn a lot from this session, which surely will pave the road for further debates and projects. Before finishing my introductory speech, let me introduce the facilitator of this session, who is Agus Morales. Agus, UAB alumni, journalist, director of 5W magazine, and the New York Times Collaborator. Agus has been working as a reporter together with Doctors Without Borders, wherever humanitarian aid was needed. He gave both to the stories of many refugees who risked their lives in search for peace and prosperity. To share peace and prosperity in Europe, He shared his knowledge and experiences as an associate professor, and he returned to our university some years ago, and now he is collaborating with us as I said, as an associate professor. He has been correspondent for the IFE news agency in India and Pakistan. He has written several texts until now, and he has awarded with the 2019 Ortega y Gasset Award for Best Journalistic History or Investigation. Agus, as I said, is the director and founder of 5W magazine, and he has accepted our invitation. So Agus, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Welcome back again to the Autonomous University of Barcelona and to Alianza Cuatro Universidades, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vice Rector. It's an honor for me to be here, and thank you for your introduction. So, as the Vice Rector mentioned, this initiative is of A4U universities. These 4 universities who are organizing this event, and today is the third session, securing food production in a climate change environment. With this issue, already also the Vice Rector, he highlighted this. Sometimes it can be abstract. Even we have problems, I think, from the academia, even from the media, to communicate with the public about this. But then it has very specific consequences on millions of people. No? So I think the panelists today, they will try to help us to understand some of the key issues around both food production and food security and climate change. And we are focusing, as you know, in all these sessions in Africa. As you know, agriculture employs 65% of Africa's labor force, So we are looking at a very specific context. And today we will hear the voices from experts from different backgrounds: crop science, fisheries, pastoralism, local knowledge. We'll be touching all these topics. And then we will reflect collectively on the complexity of the climate change impacts on African food production systems. And we'll see if we can also, because we're always focusing on the problems, to see if there are solutions also. Okay, so about the structure of the event, very briefly, because I'm just here to facilitate. First, we will have the keynote speech. Then I'll ask you to pose some questions if you'd like, both from the audience here physically and also from the people online. Then we'll have a 5-minute break. And after that, we'll have the round table with all the panelists. They will start with a little introduction from each of them about the fields, and then there will be an open discussion. And of course, I encourage you to pose questions. I will be channeling them, so no problem. Also, the people online, even when people are speaking, you can write your question in the chat. I can see it, no problem. So I will pose the question to the panelists. Okay. So let's start. Our keynote speaker is Mr. NDJIDO KANE. He's a geneticist and plant molecular biologist at the Sénégalais Agri-Research Institute. He uses the latest biotechnology tools to identify genetic traits governing crop performance in dryland environments, as well as to exploit crop genetic diversity in provision to climate change and for growing populations needs. And well, Dr. Kane, he's also director of CIRAD, which is a regional center of excellence specialized in research and training on dryland cereals and associated crops. And he also is co-director of an international joint lab, which is called LABEYRIE. Previously, he has coordinated the Biodiversity Management and Biotechnology National Program. He authors numerous publications, articles, book chapters, briefs, and public communications. And today, he will share his view on how to secure and nurture food in a climate change environment, focusing in West Africa. He's in West Africa, and he will focus on West Africa. So, Dr. Ken, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Buenos dias. My Spanish is not good, so I will make this presentation in English. Sorry for that. I would like first to thank the organizer to share my views and how my institution is working, trying to bring some solutions to cope with climate change and his consequences. And also I would like to highlight our models of Center of Excellence in the African region, so we can have together a better view of how we address this challenge through research. And I will try to make this presentation slide because I don't know if the public is also general. So excuse me if you want more deep answers or details on scientific side, please ask on the chat box. I will be very pleased to answer. I hope that the connection is good. So I will move forward into my I will try to give you some example how we have generated some innovation to secure the food system in sub-Saharan Africa. As you know, global change are hitting Africa particularly. By the burgeoning population, Africa will be the most populated continent in a few years coming. And you know that climate change also deeply affects his environment, especially soil fertility, biodiversity, and also the climate variability like temperature and rainfall, where the agriculture is mainly dependent, are hitting Africa. So how to act under these global challenges? This is really a big challenge we are facing. We need to feed population, we need to cope against climate, we need also to deal with some socio-economic movements. Those challenges, as this picture are showing, is if we do not do anything against those challenges, we will have impacts on yield, but also at the economic side. This picture at the top of the panel shows the impact of climate, especially temperature and rainfall, on yield production on different countries in West Africa. And we target sorghum and millet, and we model, we use some modeling and shows that if we do not act, the production in yield for millet and sorghum in these different countries will reduce up to 20 or 30%. And this is huge reduction when we know that these crops are staple foods for African people. So this is really a justification that we really need to act to improve production of these crops based on this prediction of climate change. Worse, besides being staple foods, they also generate, they are income generating foods. The production impact, as you saw in the panel on the bottom, shows that if you do not do anything in different Western Africa, we will not generate incomes. Again, worse, at the regional level in West Africa, you're gonna see that we're gonna have at least 2 or 3 billion of US dollars of losses or not generating incomes. So it's really urgent to act, and to do that, we rely sometimes on research innovation. I will give you the example of Senegal, but through Senegal, you can see almost the same situation on other countries. And I will try to demonstrate how from Senegal we are targeting other countries. What characterizes Senegal agro systems? So because agro systems are where we produce the foods. Senegal is a Western country in West Africa. We have the ocean on the left, and 7 kilometers, which means that if climate change affects ocean, Senegal also is affected. We have also different ecological area, as you see in this map. I will focus in my presentation on 3 areas: the ocean, the bassin arachidier, we call it the Pinon bassin arachidier in green, and also the Ferlo. The Ferlo is a pastoralist zone. Of course, there is other region up north where we have the river valley, which is characterized by the river and irrigated systems, and also the Casamance southern part, which is not like less affected by climate change because it's a forest and timber systems. So please allow me just to focus on the climate change impact on the ocean part, the bassin arachidier, and the Ferlo. Senegal is characterized by 700 kilometers, like I say, bordered by ocean. And this means that fishery is a key socio-economic sector. And it's at the regional level, if you see in the map on your right, up to 40% of this sector generate the GDP and employ near 30% of the population. And this generates a lot of incomes in the region, West Africa. At national level, this sector generates 20% of currency because we are allowing people to come and make trade in this area. More, we're generating also near 2% of the GDP in the country and employing 70% of the working population. As you know, also fishery is a main component of the staple foods, generating, providing protein intakes. At ISRA, we are doing some research trying to monitor and evaluate the fishery, the biodiversity of the ocean and how climate change is impacting this biodiversity. And we have like the board that I would like to show here that cover all the region, not only Senegal, but across West Africa. What we do as innovation that we can help to improve the food systems is we are monitoring, we are managing the resources. To do that, we monitor how climate change is impacting the marine ecosystem and what are the actions we need to be done to restore critical habitats. So doing that, we are contributing to the maintenance of biodiversity. Also, we are trying to access and characterize the fishery resources and how we can co-manage, because the research are here, but we have also other stakeholders of the sectors. So together we're trying to assist in the regulation and how we can assist the plans that are put in place to better manage this biodiversity. And last, we are trying to provide some scientific-based evidence that will support the politics, the policy, and decision makers. Here are some examples of what we have done to secure the food system in the sector of fishery. Every year, we are providing some statistics to the government and to the NGOs that help decide how we can exploit fishery and also other resources in the marine systems. Here are just some tables I'm showing to show that we are able to provide evidence that if I see at the top on your left, you see that we can provide some advice or evidence that if I take the black egg, for example, in Senegal, they are overexploited. If I take the deep demersal like gambas, they are full exploited. This means that we can provide this information to the decision makers so they can decide how to better exploit these resources. The same thing on your right, and also for deep sea pelagic, we can provide some evidence. We can monitor the resources and see which are overexploited, so we can assist the decision on managing those resources and to secure the food system. Now I would like also, after the fishery sector, jump to the pastoralism on the Ferlo area. This is also hit by climate change. This area was hit by several periods of drought. We are at the junction of the Sahel in our country. As you know, pastoralism is of economic importance in this region. And depending on countries, like in Senegal, some countries, pastoralism is more important. What I would like to highlight here is pastoralism employed near 250 million women pastoralism in Africa. This means that we need to put some emphasis, because to be more inclusive and secure food system, we need to be more inclusive and consider sectors that employ women and particularly also youth. What we are doing as innovation or to try to address challenges that this sector are facing, we're trying to characterize the environment of pastoralism ecosystems. To do that, we need to understand the dynamics of pastoralism ecosystems, how climate change are affecting these systems, and how we can restore or sequestrate carbons to generate more food for livestock. So this will help really characterize the impacts of global change, I will say, not only climate, but global change, because we have some migration, as you mentioned earlier, and also we have also other consequences of climate change in the pastoralism ecosystem. The second axe we are working on is how we can assist governance and dynamics of territories. For that, we need to understand the role of livestock farming as a level of pastoralism and agro-pastoralism territories by doing land management and trying to model the feature of pastoralism population, how they are moving across territories. I think this is also a topic that you address in the second session of this conference. And also, people are coexisting. What are the coexisting forms between farmers and livestock? And this we need to understand to better manage the challenges that we are facing. And last, how these systems are efficient. We need to produce more, sell more, and generate incomes for producers and cope with imports. Here I give you the example of milk. Milk is a major import product. So if we assist more production and also a better production, we think that we can secure also the milk, the dairy industry in Senegal. The last example I would like to give you is dryland agro-ecosystems. In Western Central Africa, there was a program called the West Africa Productivity Program that is ended now. And it was a 10-year program where we built some center of excellence who has a mandate from the ECOWAS. The ECOWAS in West and Central Africa economical countries. And they decided to build some center of excellence where they have the mandate to generate innovation technologies in one country and share it with others. In Senegal, we have the mandate to generate innovation for dryland agro-system. And we are working mainly on 6 crops, sorghum, fonio, which are cereals, and legumes like peanut and cowpea, and also sesame. And I will give you some examples of some results that we have generated, and we think that this result can contribute to generate new varieties that can help secure food system. Here, an example in the genomic side, we contribute to the sequencing of the genome of fonio. Fonio is very rich in cysteine, methionine, and mainly employing women. I think that this is really important for us. Another example also I would like to give you is what we are doing with these varieties. We register those varieties in a catalog. And once we do it in Senegal, these varieties are automatically registered in other countries in the West Africa. It means that one innovation in one country, we can share it with other countries. I will give you a more deep example later on my presentation. Here are some variety of fonio, cowpea, millet that we have registered last year. How we are contributing to increase the productivity of sesame. We are doing some participatory research assessment and also participatory varietal selection. And here is what we are doing with women and men categories. We introduce some varieties, we test them, they adopt it, and they are using them. How we are proceeding, we are doing some research in our station, but also we are doing a lot of field demonstration with in the farmers' field. And field demonstration in baby mothers try, so they can see the technology and the difference and what the benefit of adopting those technologies. Here, another example is peanut, how we are using molecular markers, SNPs, to identify threats that are of interest for and defined by the stakeholders in their breeding product profile. They tell us that they want a variety with higher yield, adapted to the environment with a high oleic acid content. So we try to identify those criteria, map them, develop some population using the backcross assisted. And most importantly, that we are tapping on the wild species and try to integrate those threats into the cultivated lines. Here also another example on sorghum this time. At the regional level, using the panel of African sorghum, not only Senegal, try to characterize the cutain that are related to the climate change and to the production. We have identified those new cutain using new approaches at the molecular level like GWAS, as you can see, to try to identify the state green threats and threats that are related to drought and water deficits. This example, I put it in my presentation just to sometimes some people think that sometimes in Africa, we are not using modern tools. Here, I just wanted to show the example how we are working from our research station to the laboratories where we have like laser ablation tomography, and we are using also some modeling to try to identify threats that are related to drought and water stress. So we can use those threats also at different level to try to identify new varieties. We are using also drones captures. And also we are developing some artificial intelligence pipeline. We're trying to do it in an automatic way using deep learning and machine learning and statistics behind. So we can correlate what we are observing at the field and what the image that we capture using drones or satellites are using. And we have a good correlation, and we are using to try to improve these pipelines and deploy it in other countries, not only Senegal, but in the West Africa area. And last picture I would like to share with you is it's good to work with in our laboratories. One aspect we try to gather information that we have in the data so share other collaborators and partners. We also do some demonstration field, as you can see in this picture. And we call actors, stakeholders, private sector, decision makers, and try to highlight the benefit of using those innovations and try to see if you can take it over and do the scaling up. This is an example of last field demonstration of the technology park we conduct last October, and we have a good participation from people coming across all Africa. There is another slide. Yes, this is a slide I want to show how we are doing, how we are sharing innovations that we have generating across country. All this arrow highlight the exchange of innovation between countries. You see some arrow going from Senegal to other country, but also we are receiving some innovation technology from other countries that we put in Senegal. So this is a good example of sharing innovation, climate smart innovation across Africa, and this is really working and contribute to increase food production and security in West and Central Africa. I would like to end my presentation with these three messages. ISRA is just agri-research at the regional level. We have a mandate to generate innovation technology for Senegal, but for other countries. I give you an example of how climate change affects the coastal area. And it's very important that we monitor and evaluate the biological resources for a sustainable and economical benefit of our food system. And fishery is important. The second point also I would like you to go with is pastoralism and agrosystems under drought-prone environments. In Senegal, Senegal is one of the countries. We are at the border and we were hit by a period of drought. It's very important, I think, to understand how climate change affects those dynamic ecosystem in the pastoralist zone. So we can provide some evidence to the decisions that are made at the territorial level, but also the more broad level. And last, we think that those climate change are really moving dynamics. We think that we need to accelerate development, and we have the modern tools to do that. So we can deploy more easily innovation by doing by involving stakeholders, private sector, and decision makers to the development, but also to the adoption and scaling up across countries. Those are really the message I would like you to go with, and I would like to thank you for your attention. Muchas gracias.
Could you hear, Dr. Ken? People are clapping after.
Yes.
Speech. So
yes, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
So I would like to ask the audience if they have. Do you have some questions for Dr. Ken? He discussed many issues, no, about fisheries, crops, dry land environment. I don't know. Is there anyone in the audience or online who would like to ask a question to Dr. Ken? Online? Nothing here? Yes, there's a question here in the audience. I hope Dr. Ken is able to listen to it.
I can hear you, Augusta.
Okay. Now there's a person in the audience who will ask you a question.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. We all know that climate change is really a problem, and especially in Africa. And from what you have discussed this morning, you say without us doing something in Africa, the impacts would be there, and they're going to reduce yields. And since agriculture is about 65% of the population in Africa engaged in agriculture, so we have to do something. So, and then as I followed your discussion, you talked about climate smart innovation, which caught my attention because that is my area of research. And I want you to tell us which of the climate smart agricultural innovations or technologies that you have developed in your country, which ones have you disseminated? Which are those that are in use? Which are those climate smart technologies that you are borrowing from other countries? As you mentioned that there are some technologies that you borrow from other countries, and you also send some to other countries. Thank you very much.
Do you want me to reply, or Augusta, I gonna answer question by question?
You just go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. The innovation that we are generating are mainly in Senegal. As I said, we have the mandate to generate innovation for pearl millet, sorghum, fonio, which is digital rice, and also cowpea and sesame. It does not mean that we cannot generate other innovation for others, but these are the crops where we have the mandate to work for the others. Now, which type of climate smart innovation we have? Here is an example of climate smart innovation we share with other countries. Those are drought adapted varieties of those crops that I just mentioned. You see example of improved millet varieties, multi-purpose, dual-purpose crops, sorghum and millets. We have high-yield oleic acid peanut, an early variety also of it. And we have also 5 new variety of cowpea. So these are, like I say, some innovations that we have generated. It's not only about crop only variety. We also generated like some management practices, like how we can better manage soil fertility. These also are some innovations that we generated and share with others. Now, which are and those are in use. Those are really in use. You can, we can share you on the chat maybe, or if you go to Google and you see MITA, MITA, is a website where we put all those innovations that we have generated and we are sharing and that are used. And it's under the CORAF website, MITA. And the innovations that we receive from other countries, I can give you an example from Niger, for example. We import, how you say that in English, chef, like goat from Niger. And we do the process of making cliche. Cliche is like the dry meat. And this is really to help women generate some incomes. So now women in Senegal are trained to prepare cliche in Senegal from goat. And this was a technology that was developed by Niger, and we imported to Senegal. The same thing for cassava. Some cassava variety or other banana varieties are imported from Cote d'Ivoire or Togo, and they are imported to Senegal, and we are trying to increase, the food system by diversification. I think that those are good example of in-use climate innovations that we have developed, and also what we have borrowed from other countries. I hope I answer your question. Over to you.
Dr. Ken, thank you very much. Thank you also for the question, very interesting. So I think we have a question online. Someone raised, I think Adama was the first one to raise her hand. So remember also for people online, you can also write your question actually on the chat. I will read it, no problem. But I think Adama was raising her hand, so I don't know if she can unmute herself and say the question or write it as she wants.
So thank you very much for this meeting, and I'm very happy to participate in this debate. And thank you, Dr. Khan. I am Adam Ajeme, and I'm participating from the south part of Senegal. Okay. So as we know that Dr. Khan present what they are doing in the ISRA, we think that it's urgent for all people to act to try to do something to help the environment. Because in Senegal, we have a big problem, because people are not conscious that in many things, what is happening every day, until the small things that, plastic, for example, you see that plastic is everywhere. And this is a problem that we have. And when you speak to the people to tell them, what are you doing, for example, why do you throw this plastic on everywhere? They say that it's normal. And I think that we have a big responsibility to go to the schools. I think that we can try to do something in primary school, high school, until the universities. A big program to focus on, and the people, they know that throwing a plastic in, for example, in an area could be there for 100 years without doing anything, and it's a bad thing for this. Maybe we will go further to help the environment. This is the first thing. The second thing that I think that we have to do is how to manage rabbiches in the communities. As we know, everywhere, for example, you take a big city like Ziguinchor. Until now, today we are speaking, all the rabbiches is thrown there in a big area without any treatment. And when you see the impact, for example, you go there and you look and you say, my God, what are we doing every day? And this is a big problem. For example, working together, maybe we can find how to make some platform, okay, to separate, for example, the rubbishes, and having for experts going to see and recycling all those things, for example, to do better things. This is second. The third thing that I think Dr. Khan knows that we know that trees are disappearing here in Casamance, for example. You take 20 years ago, you can see thousands and thousands big trees that they have maybe 100 years old, but now it's very difficult to find them here. And people are cutting trees every day, and they don't try to replant them. And we're speaking about trees that are giving at the same time food. So what we have to do to replant all those trees, like baobab trees, dita's trees, all those trees that are giving food to the people, and trying to replant them everywhere, okay? And I think that Dr. Khan can help us in those programs to replant, to reforest all those parts of Senegal with big trees that are first good for the environment, and second for giving food. And the last one for my intervention is we have some small island, for example, from the Sin Salum until Casamance. There are islands which are disappearing every year. When you go there, you wait for 2-3 years, and you go back there, you see that the ocean is destroying all those parts of the land that they have. And it's very, very heavy to see that the population are there, but they don't know what to do. And we think that we can do something to help all this together with some project to do. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adama. I think this was more of a comment than a question. So we'll go to the next question. But remember, just better also for the discussion afterwards, if you can write your question on the chat. The people in the audience, of course, here, you can ask directly. There's no other way. But the people online, please send the question on the chat. And I think Mr. Lucas Yamat, he wants to pose a question. He's one of the panelists. So I will do the proper introduction later, but now he will pose a question, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much. An interesting presentation, Ken. And I caught up by the point related to livestock, and you are working to improve economic contribution of livestock, especially income from livestock products. And I'm wondering, how do you capture that? Because in my experience from East Africa, I understand that most of the livestock products produced through the pastoral system do not go into the formal marketing system. So it is really hard to capture the real contribution of the livestock sector into the economy. So can you tell us a little bit about the tools or the system that you have to ensure that the milk that is produced through the pasture system or the meat that produced through the pasture systems are captured and assigned an economic value, that means a monetary value, to say confidently this is the real contribution that we are making. Sorry, I use this to answer to ask this question because it is a bit a background set, and maybe the chat will not ask it properly, but I will write on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adama and Lucas, for your question and also the points that you raised. In my presentation, I did it in purpose to try to show you three different sectors: fishery, pastoralism, and also crops. Why I do that, I just wanted to share that you can take one sector also in other part of the food systems, and you're gonna probably have the same, the same challenges. We have to cope against change. Now, regarding some points that I did not mention, for plastics, like Adam raised, plastic also is another issue, of course, in our country. What I will say is that, as you just mentioned in your intervention, we need to train people. We need to sensibilize people, inform people about the impact of using such things that can impact the environment. I think you are a good actor of that. I think we need also to work on what I say, not mindset, I will say mind reset. We have to work on youth and also population, because there are the more people that are affected, how we can manage their environment so they will have a better productivity across. I did also in purpose working, giving example of fishery. I'm not a geneticist of fishery, but I give you an example to show you that ocean islands need to be managed because they conserve a lot of diversity, and also there's a lot of resources that can generate incomes and safer foods. I think that's what I give you an example. And global challenges, global changes are really threats on that, and I do agree with you. So there is need to conduct some research, innovations, and also actions, and some policy also that can prevent the loss of biodiversity in that agrosystems. So this is also one of the message I would like you to keep is the management of the biodiversity is not only widely. It's not only agriculture, it's a fishery, it's a pastoralism. That's what I give you these three examples. I think that we can discuss if I can give more details at the scientific level what we have done. Adam, you have my email, we can be in touch. Lucas, you're right. How we can assess the product, that the product are capturing or assigning or generating incomes. I think this is your main concern, because we had some experience in West Africa, which is very difficult to capture. And also you're right here, because pastoralism in West Africa, particularly in Senegal, Niger, Burkina Faso, these are extensive pastoralism. And it means that it's very difficult to follow those people working on the livestock area. Fortunately, we have now data from like 2 decades that allowed us to do some modeling. We are using some modeling tools now with those data and try to capture what are the parcours, the routes, I would say, people are using meat, and who are the people that are interested in taking over those products. More and more, we are seeing the private sector being engaged of buying the milk to women and people who are putting the milk and also the meat and bring it to the cities. And I think that capturing all those data, those new actors, and doing some modeling, socioeconomic modeling, I'm saying, this will help us better capture, and follow the product development from the livestock agrosystems to the markets and also to the consumer. And I think this is a new area that we are, exploring, and we are seeing some new results that I will be very pleased to share and keep you also in touch with our colleagues working on this area. I hope also I bring some answers to your questions. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ken. I think it's very interesting, and thank you everyone for the questions. I think we can do a last question. I don't know if there's anyone in the audience. Otherwise, I have a question here also. But if there's someone in the audience who want to ask a question, no? Okay, so before, oh yes, there is a question there. So we'll keep the question online for the next roundtable. Actually, it's Victoria, so she will be there. So no problem. Okay, we have a question from the audience, Dr. Ken.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very nice. I would like to ask, because you're a plant geneticist and you work with crops, improving crops, and then you share this innovation. I would like to ask, what is the regime for patents, for example, with the seeds? When you develop a new innovation, a new seed, how do you share it? Is it because I would like to know if you cooperate with companies, for example, whether this is a common resource or you patent it as a private resource. How do you manage that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a really interesting question and areas that we really need to work on, I would say, if I capture your question, how we work with companies, actors, the private sector, and how we deal with, IPs, patents. And this, I think, is a global challenge. In Africa, even in the world. If you see, most of the seed companies are almost the same thing, and they have all the rights and the IPs. In West Africa, we have a particularity. Seed system was always something that are common and share. We never developed this attitude of having IPs or being the only company or country with the rights with the crops. I give you in my example how we share innovation, and I say that we register some crops, and one crops that is registered in one country under the ECOWAS law, it's automatically shared and used by other countries. You see, we put in front how we can share innovation, how innovation can be used and scaled, and we did not necessarily discuss about patents and IPs. You see, because it's an attitude that we already have here in West Africa to share. This said, we are having more and more interest and people working on that. We are working with the private sector because if we want innovation to be scaled up, we do believe that the private sector have a role to play. And we also see that private sector is not only the main company that we used to have. Here in Senegal, we work with several companies. I will not do some publicity for them, but we have some company working here. But our belief is farmer organizations are getting organized and being more and more interesting and of being dealers. And we think that this is more sustainable in our in our area. We are also collaborating with those companies. There is no IP necessary between NARS and those companies, but we have some agreements, memorandum of understanding where we define how those seeds should be produced, share, and use. But it's not like IP you used to guys to have in other country. It's really a different environment. This is, like I say, an area we need to work on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ken, for your answer. It's very interesting also about the sharing innovation across the region, and thank you very much for the question also from the audience. Okay, I was going to close, but there's another question, so we'll do this question because it's very important. Audience want to participate, so we'll go for the last question.
Thank you first for the presentation. I thought it was very nice. And I'm sorry if this question came up already in the presentation, but what I was wondering if there's any way to modify plants in a way that they can combat water scarcity, because I think that that will also be one of the main issues we will have through climate change.
This is also another interesting question. So let the audience ask questions. Water scarcity and dry spell. As I mentioned, Senegal is at the border. We are facing a lot of dry spells and water scarcity. Water is really a priority. We need to do some management of water. Less and less water we'll have. If I give you the models and the predictions, we will receive less water in a very narrow windows. And our agriculture is rainfall dependent. So we really need to manage the water that we will receive. Okay, and this this demand like new approach and new investments also. How we can, secure or manage those water, the water. And I do agree that dry spells, water scarcity are really priority, and we need to develop also new approach, new technology, and generate new evidence to help our policy also put the management system that is required to deal against that. But I totally agree with you. This is a top priority.
So thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so now we'll have a 5-minute break. After this, we will have a roundtable and discussion with all the panelists. So it's a short break, only 5 minutes. Thank you very much for your questions, for your participation. It's very good. So see you in 5 minutes. We will continue now with the session. Now we'll start with the roundtable and discussion. So I want to, by the way, thank you everyone for the questions and your involvement, your participation. And we'll have some space also after this for more questions and everything and discussion. So that's very good. So the idea now is that we have the panelists. I will introduce every panelist, and then he or she will do. I will ask a question, and he or she will answer. And after this, just to warm up, After this, there will be open discussions. So also you can send your questions via the chat, or there's some questions via YouTube. Also, we have the questions. All the questions will be addressed. Don't worry. And also here you can also share your views, comments, questions, whatever. Okay. So we will start the roundtable now with our great panelists. We will start with VANESSE LABEYRIE. She is researcher at the SENS research unit at CIRAD. CIRAD is the French agricultural research and cooperation organization working for the sustainable development of tropical and Mediterranean regions. She's in Montpellier in France. She holds a PhD in population biology. Her research aims to understand how rural populations in the tropics manage plant diversity in agricultural landscapes to deal with the spatial heterogeneity and temporal variability of the environment. And she is particularly interested in understanding how biological resources and agroecological knowledge circulate through social networks and how the properties of these networks influence agroecosystems' resilience in the face of global changes. Her current projects are based in the diversified agroecosystems in Madagascar and Senegal. So, Dr. LABEYRIE, to start with you, I will pose you a question. Why are social relations important for smallholder farmers in Africa to adapt to climate change? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And can you see my screen as well?
Very nice landscape, yes.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for this invitation. So as you say, I'm working on crop diversity management and how rural society in the global south interacts with this resource. And I'm particularly interested in the different pathways through which farmers get access to this very valuable resource that is crop diversity, and on the role of the relationship networks in this access. So I am now working with smallholder farming communities in West Africa and Madagascar. And so small farms cultivating less than 5 hectares are now the majority of farms in Africa. And this is something we frequently tend to forget in Europe, is that these farms produce a significant share of the food at the global scale, as those small farms produce about half of the calories that are consumed. So they do so while having very limited assets in general, so limited money to invest in their farming activities, and hence limited access to agricultural inputs such as fertilizer or irrigation or farming tools. And hence they are not able to, I would say, artificialize or control their environment as more intensive farms would do. And they have to deal more than big farms with these environmental perturbations. So I like a lot this picture because it illustrates the strengths and the power of social relationship in smallholder communities. So in these communities, the network of relationship of different kind in which people are embedded represents really a key resource. Individuals are embedded in networks of relationship of different kinds. There are social relationship with the family or relatives, friendship relationship, or also a relationship through the common belonging to groups like politic or religious or mutual help groups. There are also a lot of commercial relationship, of course, for instance, between sellers on the local markets and customers, between sellers in shops and these kind of things. And there are also a more, I would say, professional relationship with between farmers and extension service technicians and also NGOs. So previous studies in smallholder communities show that these network of relationship are really key for smallholders to access to a range of resources, for instance, to borrow money or agricultural tools or to get help for agricultural tasks, but also to get seeds or information and advice. And this is what is frequently referred as the social capital, which represents the idea that social relationship represent a real resource for people. So I will not now select an example from my own research to illustrate this importance of the social capital. So I conduct research, especially in West Africa and in Senegal. And in the survey we conducted in this groundnut basin area that NDJIDO talk about. And we asked farmers where they get their seed and what were the main seed source they had for their main crop. And we found that more than 70% of the seeds they get were obtained through their social relationship with other farmers and in particular with their relatives. Then we also see that about 20% of these seeds were obtained through more commercial relationship with the local seed sellers on markets, but also on the small shop in the village or this kind of things. And only 10% of the seed came from the more official seed distribution channels, such as agro dealers, but also extension services from the agricultural ministry. So we can see that for these farmers, access to this key resource that is crop seeds, their social network is really pivotal, but they also mobilize a range of relationship of different types. Now, it is important to see that farmers get their seed through a range of relationships, dominantly social ones, but also at the local level, but also over longer distance. What we observe is that this diversity of relationship is really key for smallholders' capacity to adapt to perturbations. First, it helps them to secure their seed provision. For instance, if a drought occurs and seed production is affected locally, having ties with relatives in other areas that are less drought prone will allow farmers to replenish their seed stock. And this is, for instance, what we observe in the groundnut basin in Senegal. Then this diversity of stakeholders who provide seeds to smallholders gives them opportunity to access to new crops that may be more adapted to the changing climatic or socioeconomic conditions. And what we see is farmers keep on changing their crop over time to adapt to new constraints and needs. And there is no one crop solution for them. So it's very important for them to get access to a range of different crops. So one big issue now concerning adaptation of smallholders to climate change is that this importance of a relationship between farmers and a range of stakeholders in resource access and their local mode of interaction are not considered in development programs and policies. And so efforts should really urgently be made in this direction. And we see that rather than trying to apply external modes of organization, largely inspired from the northern countries, it's really important to account for this, this organization, local organization. So, for instance, concerning seeds, to give a concrete example, we can see that the legal framework and seed and crop breeding in West Africa do not officially recognize smallholder farmers' right to exchange or sell seeds from their own production. And also agricultural and adaptation policies and development programs largely ignore the local systems of seed circulation through relationship of different kind, being social or commercial ones. So they mainly tend to structure and centralize crop breeding and seed distribution, which is threatening smallholders' capacity to meet the future challenge of adapting to global change. So now building on this local relationship network is really key to build more resilient agricultural systems. And this includes, for instance, for crops, supporting the local seed dissemination mechanisms. And it also deserves creating new ways of interaction and networking between the local stakeholders, farmers and seed sellers, but also with like research and professional breeders and extension service officer to also allow to bring and co-develop new varieties that are adapted to the fast changing conditions through participatory breeding. So I hope I was clear in highlighting this importance of relationship network at different scales in climate adaptation, and I'm ready to discuss about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. LABEYRIE. Of course, the audience knows that if they have some questions, we will address them afterwards. Now we're going to continue with the panelists. It was very interesting, this introduction by Dr. LABEYRIE. And now we have Dr. NARRIMAN SALEH-JIDDAWI. She is Vice Chair, Women in Marine Science Center. She holds a PhD on the Marine Sciences University of Dar es Salaam. And that's why she's a senior marine scientist. Until 2018, she worked as a senior lecturer at the Institute of Marine Sciences and in the UDSM, where she published not less than 100 papers and reports related to marine sciences, including climate change. She is now a deputy chair of the Women in Marine Sciences Network, Zanzibar, as I mentioned, and also she's a council member of the State University of Zanzibar, where she was involved in the V3R Pwani Norhead project dealing with climate change issues. She is involved in various activities, including teaching and supervising PhDs and MSc students in a number of universities. And she has worked on women's empowerment along the coast, including in fisheries and mariculture. She has supervised more than 30 PhDs and MSc students working on issues related to fisheries, marine issues, and climate change. So, Dr. SALEH-JIDDAWI, I would like to ask you, what is the situation of fisheries in an environment affected by global change, like Zanzibar, which is a small island?
So now I'm starting. Okay, I just want to talk about the status of food availability in a climate changing environment in Zanzibar. As the introduction was said, I'm a marine scientist. Fisheries is very important activity among those who live along the coast of Zanzibar, and most of it is artisanal. That is, they're using local gears and small vessels like outrigger canoes and basket straps and so on. But the number of fishermen is about 50,000, according to the census of 2020, and there are about 2,000 fishmongers. The sector contributes a lot to the income of the country, not less than 5.2% to the GDP. Coastal community also gets most of their food resources from the ocean, like fish, bivalves, and crustaceans through fishing and also through culturing. Okay, it is a small island experiencing human and environmental factors such as pollution, illegal fishing, and also climate change. And the fishery resources contribute to negative impact to the livelihood of the support, because if it is reduced, then they don't get a lot of fish. And climate changes observed in Zanzibar are characterized by increased temperatures, strong winds, and irregular rainfall. And also this causes reduce in different types of food resources found in the ocean, which the local community use. Okay, these are the economic importance of food, the economic importance of the socio-cultural importance of the fisheries. You have tourism, not less than 500,000 tourists visit Zanzibar per year. And also they all love tourists, they all love fish food when they come. It creates employment, like boat builders, etc. Also, it is the most common source of dietary protein among the community of Zanzibar. Not less than 20 to 25 kilograms of fish is eaten per year. That is the per capita consumption. There is also export of fish and sea cucumbers, and also mariculture like seaweed farming, which is number 3 economic earner for Zanzibar, and other resources like milkfish and so on. The type of fish, there are different types of fish, but the most common is reef fish and also large pelagic. I don't know why it's also not coming, but this is the one. So it's a lot of different, not less than 500 types, but the most common ones are the reef fish and the large pelagics. Also, we have women, different women participating in fishery activity. For example, they collect shells, they collect octopus, they also process the fish once it's landed, and also they contribute, some of it is eaten at home and some they sell. So they get some income from that. So I don't know why it's not coming, but I've already said it. And the next slide was about, now talking about the food security. Okay, this is the role of women in fishery, which I talked about. And now I'm talking about the food security. It exists at all times and have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. And the definition gives rise to 4 dimensions of food security: availability of food, accessibility, utilization, and stability. However, with the change in environment, changes have occurred. For example, some types of fish have started also to disappear. What needs to be done to adapt to the impact of climate change? Climate change threatens to reverse the progress made so far in the fight against hunger and malnutrition. Therefore, there's a need to raise awareness that climate change is already impacting the food security and nutrition of the most vulnerable, and that if action is not taken quickly, climate change will increasingly threaten the achievement of the goal to eradicate hunger. There is a need to take ambitious action to tackle climate change, for example, so that finally impacts the food security of people, and to show the range of actions needed. So fishing and fish farming practices and management will need to adapt to changing species composition and locations, and also know how to face the increased risks at sea. Adaptation options to declining or variable yields in terms of fisheries technologies and management will need to be carefully assessed to avoid exacerbating the overexploitation of fisheries or impacting habitats. For aquaculture, a set of adaptive practices need to be identified, such as water quality monitoring, species selection, selective breeding, genetic improvement, site selection, and improved catch and pond construction. Because these catch, when the fish is cultured in the deep water, the water there is much cooler. Also, climate change reduces food safety due to higher rates of microbial growth at increased temperature, particularly in fishery supply chains. So use of ice boxes needs to be considered. And lastly, other factors are improved fishing techniques and gears to be more effective, set up system for processing and storage so as to reduce post-harvest loss, perhaps form cooperatives which fishermen can work together and make them able to get income and make them able to move into deeper waters, which most of the fish have moved to because it is cooler. Alternative livelihoods, which are sustainable and coping with climate change, mariculture, such as cage farming, which I also mentioned before, microcredit schemes to help getting of funds, as I mentioned above, so that they can do help get money to buy better gears and vessels and move offshore. Sea level change also causes flooding, and so there's a need to make good walls along the beach and integrated coastal zone management, and also have early warning systems and education, and introduce improved vessel stability, safety, and communication. Thank you very much.
Asante.
Asante.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jiddawi, for this introduction. We'll have more time to speak with you. And right now we are going to talk to Mr. Lucas Yamat. You already know him because he was posing a question before. And now I will introduce you first. Mr. Lucas Yamat, he's a climate change economist working with the Terrestrial Ecosystem Group at the Basque Center for Climate Change, which is known as BC3. He joined the BC3 after having worked for the Nature Conservancy since 2019 as Deputy Program Director for the Endangered Ecosystems of Northern Tanzania program and as a Northern Tanzania Conservation Projects Coordinator. And before, he worked with various Tanzanian organizations for over 10 years in managing programs across the African drylands, focusing on building partnerships between policymakers and non-state actors. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics from Muzumbe University in Tanzania and a Master's degree of Science in Climate Change and Sustainable Development from the University of Dar es Salaam. He is currently a doctoral student at the University of the Basque Country, and his thesis evaluates the sustainability of African land uses with focus on livestock, crops, and wildlife economies. So, Mr. Yamat, we already discussed or mentioned the importance of pastoralism. What are the perspectives of pastoralism in East Africa, where you are focusing?
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and the moderator of this session. Yeah, you did a good introduction to me, and I will go directly to the question. But first, I need to remind ourselves what pastoralism is, because that is something that not had today. So pastoralism is a production system for millions of people across the African dryland ecosystems, where people get their livelihood through keeping domesticated animals such as cattle, sheep, goats, donkeys, camel, etc. And these kind of domesticated animals are kept in a strategic mobile lifestyle in arid and semi-arid lands. So this is a kind of a complex and dynamic system, because these systems really try to adapt to changes in different aspects of life, including the economic, the environmental, and social change. Now, let me go into the perspective, how the perspective of pastoralists in East Africa. And I would like to put the perspective in two broader perspectives that there are myths or misconception about pastoralism, and also the realities about pastoralism. And of course, I will categorize in three groups of people who try to explain who are the pastoralists. So let me start by pastoralists themselves. What pastoralism, a pastoralist perceived to be, what is pastoralism? So they say pastoralism is our life because they can't do anything efficiently to meet their basic needs, but only to do pastoralism. And of course, they say pastoralism is our cultural identity because it distinguishes them from the fisheries communities, from the hunter-gatherers communities, from the crop growers, etc. So it's a kind of cultural identity. But also pastoralist says our pastoralism is our social relation and assets because we pay, for example, dowry using livestock we have, and that is a kind of social relationship. And we cultivate friendship using the livestock we have. You can give someone a cow or a goat or a sheep, and we call by that name. And that is a kind of relationship building. But also we say pastoralism is a way of conflict resolution because any kind of conflict that can raise among the community, the only way to settle that is to give a cow or a goat or whatever to another person, and that will be over. And also they say pastoralism is our future because our future generation our future generation, they have nothing to inherit except the cows and the goat and the sheep and the camels that we keep. Let me look at another perspective of researchers, how researchers perceive pastoralism. The scientific evidence show that pastoralism is a sustainable land use system, especially in the arid lands or completely drier area where the production system has failed because they need more resources than what pastoralists can use. And also they say pastoralists are custodian of biodiversity conservation. And that is why you find a lot of national park, a lot of game reserve, a lot of wildlife within the pastoralist land. And they say also this sector have a massive contribution to the national economic. Now, let me shift the perspective to another group of policymakers. Pastoralism is perceived by policymakers as an old-fashioned system, production system, that now need to be replaced by the more productive land uses, like wildlife conservation and crop growing, without knowing that this is a system that is sustainable in a more drier area compared to any other. So with climate change, you can't do anything else than pastoralism in the dryland ecosystems. But also pastoralism, they use mobility as the way to cope with changing environment. But most governments policies don't tolerate mobility, and they say maybe mobility need to be hung out because it's more destructive and causing conflict, so they must settle. And also we get a lot from developing countries that they blame pastoralists and livestock sector as greenhouse gases emitters. And this is a generalization based on industrial or intensive livestock keeping systems. So what should be done is that policies and practices need to be adaptive or to change, and not to force pastoralists to settle or hang off their mobility system, but they should focus on building extensive experience that pastoralists have been using for millions of years. That is how I end this response. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Yamat. Very interesting. And we will now speak with Dr. Victoria Reyes Garcia. She's an ICRIA is the Catalan Institution for Research and Advanced Studies. She's an ICRIA research professor at the Institute of Environmental Science and Technology here at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. She holds a PhD in anthropology, and her research focuses on indigenous and local knowledge, particularly regarding environmental issues. Reyes Garcia coordinates the Laboratory for the Analysis of Socio-Ecological Systems in a Global World. Her research has been funded by the European Research Council, first to study the adaptive nature of culture using a cross-cultural approach, and later to study the potential contribution of indigenous and local knowledge to research on climate change impacts. So Dr. Reyes Garcia, I think we can actually discuss on this. How can local knowledge of, in this case, of African rural populations like farmers, agropastoralists, fishers, how can local knowledge help them cope with climate change impacts?
Thank you very much, Agus, for the presentation. Thank you also to all the speakers for their talks. I think it's good that I go to the end because I can, in answering this question, I can also use some of the examples that have been given by my colleagues before. So let me start just by saying that during millennia, indigenous people and local communities living in Africa, but in other parts of the world, they have developed very complex knowledge systems that have helped them to adapt to different environments. So human populations can live in areas that are extremely cold or in very dry areas, right? And this is thanks to this knowledge that indigenous people and local communities have developed to adapt to these systems. And these include agricultural systems that have been discussed here. These include pastoralisms, and through this knowledge, there is not only the management knowledge, but there is also a whole system that comes around this knowledge. For example, VANESSE was discussing how social relations that are embedded in the local systems help maintain the diversity of fisheries. And Lucas was now also telling us about how mobility is a basic component of the system, right? So there are many components of these local knowledge systems that have helped people around the world to adapt to these very different environments. Now, these systems have helped human populations to adapt to the world. But now in a world with a changing climate, populations that still rely mostly on these natural resources dependence are more affected by climate change than other types of other populations. It's not the same depending on your agriculture to eat, than having a 1 degree increase, but sitting in an AC room, right? So if your livelihood depends on natural resources of the environment, you are heavily affected. Your livelihood is heavily affected. And this is also why in this project that I'm directing, we are studying how indigenous people recognize how the impacts of climate change are affecting not only the climatic system, temperature, rainfall, but they also, through changes in the climatic systems, there are also other changes happening in the biophysical systems that affect their livelihood. And we have had several examples here on the fisheries, on the crops, on the pastoralisms, and also their cultures, their identities. So indigenous people local communities in Africa and in other places see these changes, see these impacts of climate change in their life, and they adapt to those using their knowledge systems. Here we have we started today with a keynote presentation by Guido telling us how from the scientific side we are trying to generate new varieties and new ways that people can adapt, but people also adapt through their own systems. For example, I mean, Lucas was talking about how people adapt to the changing environment through mobility, or we also have examples of how people adapt, changing the varieties that they put depending on how the systems change. However, so people, I mean, the point I wanted to make here is like how people who live in close relationship with the environment have this deep knowledge of the environment that can help them to navigate changes in the climate. And this knowledge is not only knowledge of the physical environment, it's also knowledge on social relations, knowledge on how to move in the ecosystem. Now, because climate change is happening so fast, local knowledge sometimes is not very well adapted. And also it's very important to highlight, and this is something that has been mentioned by several of the speakers, that climate change in the cases of rural populations in Africa adds to many other situations of vulnerability. The issue is not that local communities are facing climate change now as in itself, right? But the climate change is affecting them in a situation in which in many cases they are a disempowered population, they have low infrastructure, their knowledge is infravalued, their cultures are being treated as old or old-fashioned or not good, no? So climate change should be, when we talk about how the impacts of climate change on rural populations, it should be contextualized with these other forms of vulnerability. So just to kind of like wrap up and conclude with a more short answer to your question, I think that local knowledge cannot help people to adapt to climate change unless these knowledge systems are better integrated with other forms of knowledge, for example, in our case, scientific knowledge. So there should be more dialogue between us doing science and proposing solutions to adaptation to climate change, and understanding what are the views of the local people, what are the views of the local knowledge. I think the presentation of Lucas was very interesting in that sense, because he provides like the views on the same area from 3 different points of views. And while if we continue considering local knowledge or the knowledge of local people who have managed environments for millennia as something that it's old-fashioned and not useful, there will not be possibilities for using this knowledge to improve the adaptations. And just to conclude, I just want to remember that our knowledge is not helping us either, right? Scientific knowledge is not helping to solve the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis. So we also need other forms of knowledge to tackle the challenges that society is living. So I leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reyes Garcia. Very interesting, and we have a lot of interrelated topics, issues, and now we have 1 hour in which we can have an open floor for everyone and all the panelists. We can share. You can share your views regarding several issues, and also if there are questions from online, the people who are online, you can write them here. And after some discussion between you guys, then we will, in around 25-30 minutes, or even before, depending on how it goes, we will open also the floor for the audience to ask questions from here physically. So to start with, actually, I will use a question which we received by YouTube, because I think it's a good starting point, and some of you can answer it separately, or you can exchange views regarding this question. But the question is this: I would like to ask you if you consider actions in your country specifically involving your own culture and not considering Western innovation. I think this is more suit to Dr. Ken or Mr. Lucas Yamat or also Dr. Jiddawi. I don't know if some of you guys want to jump into this question.
I thank you very much, and also congratulations to all the presenters. I think all these are really interesting. In my presentation, I emphasize how here in Western Central Africa, research and innovation and knowledge are generated and shared. Why I did so, I would like to stress that what we are doing are driven by a demand-led breeding or demand-led situation. It's not something that researchers wanted to do or decide to do. It's something that came up from stakeholders or market or like socioeconomics situation. And we are trying to use our tools, our research, our knowledge to propose some solution. It's not something that we would want to conduct. So it's really specific to our situation here in Western Central Africa. And the model of Center of Excellence of CERAAS, as I said in my picture, each country have mandate to work for the others, for the national level, but also for the others. I think this is a really good example of how we are addressing the needs of population in Western Central Africa. So maybe Lucas can also share his review.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. It is really interesting that our policies and regulatory framework and practices is sometimes informed by the discourses at the big level, at the international level, or at the developed countries' point of view. And that really kills a lot of experiences that we have because we don't capitalize on our own knowledge. And Victoria, of course, talked about this, that integration of our own local knowledge is really essential to achieve sustainability and a secure food future for people, because the idea around sustainable development goals is leave no one behind. And if this knowledge are ignored, then we'll not go ahead, but will be left behind without having our own perspective of doing things. But we have, we can focus on at the national level. We may be forced to copy and paste some system that are advocated or provided by the developed countries. So of course it is in the sense of pastoralist, we understand from the archaeological studies, they say pastoralist has lived for more than 6,000 years, but the policies that we design now, we need to change completely this system into something else, which is like killing millions of people who don't have options or food security or other livelihood assets. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yamat. I don't know if the rest of the panelists, they want to jump into this question from...
Can I also talk?
I think I can hear... Hello?
NARRIMAN, yeah, please go ahead.
I just want to talk a little bit about the use of local knowledge. It is very important, and we are trying a lot to encourage the community in using their local knowledge to cope in coping mechanism. For example, if they see there is erosion along the beach, they themselves know what to grow in order to control erosion. For example, along the local beach in the east coast of Zanzibar, they grow special plants locally known as mlakasa, but scientific is Ipomea grass, which they grow to control erosion. Also, they use a special fish in culturing, which they are aware of and which they know they can tolerate heat, instead of just using any fish which are maybe seen in books and so on and so forth. Also in boat building, they use shark liver oil to put in the boats, which they know locally that it controls fouling organism. So these are just some examples of local knowledge which community use to encourage them to still use their local boats and go fishing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jiddawi. Anyone else wants to?
Yeah,
Yes.
so if I can just talk on that point, which, I mean, I am the defender in my in my life of the local knowledge, but I also think it's important to emphasize that there are limits to local knowledge, and I mean we have put some examples that are good, but local knowledge change, by the nature of local knowledge, is to change very slowly. And the changes that local people are facing now are very fast, right? The changes in the agricultural seasons, people can see them. I mean, people report, no, in the past it was not different. And not only due to climate change, also due to other drivers of change, you know, population growth, pollution, someone talk about plastic contamination. I mean, there are all these changes that happen so rapidly, and local knowledge sometimes cannot go as fast. So I think it's important in all this to keep in mind that all knowledge systems are valuable, and what we need is more dialogue between different knowledge systems. So local knowledge can bring some contributions, science can also bring some contributions, the perspective of policymakers, or so I think that my view in all this is how we actually generate more dialogue, because local knowledge is not going to solve the problem by itself alone either, right? Because some of our problems are really global, and you can say maybe a small ecosystem, but local knowledge by nature is not addressing global problems. But the issue is, how do we establish systems of dialogues between knowledge systems that allow that all the contributions can be done in a fair way, and not related to power issues or to this idea that all this knowledge system is not valid, or you are trying to impose, when no. I mean, also as a scientist, sometimes people tell us, oh, you are trying to give me your views and impose your colonial views, and you're like, oh, I'm just trying to also contribute, no? So this issue of the dialogue between knowledge systems, I think is a first step, very important at the policy level and also at the research level.
I don't know if Dr. LABEYRIE would like to add something to this debate.
No, I think I fully agree with what Vicky said, and we see in the field, for instance, when studying crop diversity, how the interweaving of local and scientific knowledge is important. For instance, in Senegal, in the groundnut basin, you can see that we have a coexistence of local variety that have been bred for hundreds, thousands of years locally and exchanged, and we have also varieties that have been released by the research centers, for instance, for groundnuts, and that farmers use a lot also. So it's really important to acknowledge the complementarity of the different sources of knowledge, and just to account better for the local knowledge in development action, because so far it has been fairly limited. So, and to develop new ways of interacting between the different types of stakeholders.
That's very good, very interesting. Now that we are talking to Dr. LABEYRIE, and also before it was Dr. Reyes Garcia, I would like to ask you why African rural populations seem to have their capacity to produce food diminished. If the cause is climate change, or if we should look at other reasons also, because I think you are conducting a project in which you're analyzing the effects of climate change on food production. So maybe it's interesting that you can speak about the several factors involved, and of course we can also open the floor to all the panelists. They know about the issue. Maybe one of you can start discussing about this.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe, I mean, I think the answer to this question has been given also through the different kind of like presentations that we had, no? Farmer or rural populations in Africa, but also in other parts of the global south, they face climate change, but they face a history of colonization. They face, I mean, they have many historical situations that unless we kind of like address them, it's very difficult to say people, okay, now you fight against climate change, you adapt, or your knowledge, I mean, we have to, there was this case that I always think it's very important in India. There was like this very massive rains, and then there was this dam that break, and then so many people die, no? And then the politicians said, oh, but you know, it's climate change, you can do nothing. But then it's like, okay, why there was a dam in the middle of the city? Why there were people living close to those? They didn't have other water resources. So it's not, the climate change aggravates the situations, but there are some situations of economic relationships between countries in the north and the south. Yeah, I mean, all these migratory problems that unless we don't address them, we cannot really solve the population of, I mean, the issue of food security against climate change, because we sometimes we cannot hide behind climate change to not acknowledge that there is a history of inequality. And in relation with climate change, there is also this issue that Africa has not produced a problem, no? In general, most of the climate change issue has been generated by consumption in the countries of the north, but because of the dependence of the primary activities is more, the impacts are disproportionately felt in rural populations, right? So I mean, the point is that climate change aggravates situations of inequalities, and unless policies are more global and holistic and looking at this issue in a more comprehensive way, it's going to be difficult to kind of like generate adaptation strategies that are useful for everybody. That's, I mean, that will be my opinion on that topic.
I don't know if Dr. LABEYRIE also wants to add something about this, or?
Yes, I fully agree briefly, but I think NDJIDO KANE will have also many things to say about that. I think there is indeed a variety also of factors involved, and that's partially result from also this colonial history. But for instance, in the groundnut basin where I work, we can see that there is a big issue about soil, and this is also a major problem in Africa, with problems of soil fertility that is decreasing because of big population increase and a variety of factors, and decrease of livestock breeding and these kind of things. And what is important to see also is that in sometimes policies and development actions are also compromising the adaptation of farming communities to climate change, and push them into directions which are not sustainable, and that for instance would lead to stop growing like the local staple, and rather fully engage in economic relationship that may be very dangerous and makes this system more vulnerable to shocks. So all these kind of things also play a role. So I think maybe Guido and Lucas want to add something.
Yes. Thank you. And the panelists are very active. That's very good. That's what we want, discussion. So we will go first with Lucas and then with Guido.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the decline in food production has a lot of things to, there's a lot of drivers that drive that. And I can consider that in different production systems, we have some other challenges that are out of that kind of production system. Maybe I can talk about the dietary shift people maybe don't want the fresh things from the field, so they want to buy from the supermarket, which are more industrialized products. So kind of dietary shift also have a contribution to the decline in food production. And maybe also it is rooted to population growth, because if you have more mouths to feed and you have a small piece of land, or specifically a productive land to produce more food, then you get a food scarcity problem. So, but also it is about the input that people use. Yeah, in my country, for example, they depends on seeds from recommended companies, and they abandon the traditional one, and maybe that is also another kind of drivers. So abandon the local knowledge, of course, if you want to say. And here I talk about the traditional seeds that produce more, and this is also a question of climate change, because maybe the traditional seeds are not tolerant to the changing climate, but also they don't give more yield, and they need more time to mature. So you want now to shift into the short terms solutions. So maybe in the future we'll face a big crisis because of the seed input that we are using, because we don't know how many times you have to gonna use. And if you buy the certified seeds, you can only plant twice or 3 times, and then you need to go back to the shop and buy a new one, because the tolerable to climate change condition will shake that, and they're no longer giving more yield as you wanted. So I can give in these 2 perspectives on the dietary shift and also on the input used, especially the certified ones. I don't know how to call it, but it is that way. And also the traditional seeds that smallholder farmers are using. And also in pastoral systems, they're adapting to new breeds that are more vulnerable to changing climate, and they die because they need more inputs from the rangeland, which we don't have. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Ken, floor is yours. You can also explain, you were texting here, you were writing also your opinion on this, so you can also develop on this and keep the discussion going on. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the panelists are all right. I just wanted to add that we have to consider that food production systems are specifics and also dynamics. There is history, and there is socioeconomics part, and climate is only one aspect of the food systems. And I think all the panelists bring some points that highlight this situation. That's what I wanted to say. I think that this idea came up from the idea that agriculture in Africa are rainfed agriculture, and they think only about climate change, but they forget about the history, the socioeconomics, the knowledge in Africa, and people are not valorizing all these aspects. I think 2 words I wanted to put, and I put it in the chat, it's a specifics and it's a dynamic. The choice of agriculture change.
Thank you, Dr. Ken. Actually, okay, before we go to this, we were discussing about how to share knowledge. And I would like to ask you how you do in your universities, in your institutions, to which systems you use to share knowledge, to share also experiences in your field, if you use them.
Well, I mean, I can start. So, I mean, I come, as you know, as you said at the beginning, I'm an anthropologist, right? So anthropology has also been seen as a very colonial, has a very colonial history in the sense of like the first anthropologists were there to kind of like understand people to better colonize them somehow, right? So it's a discipline that has changed a lot in the way they relate to local people. And through my career, through my projects, we always emphasize this idea to not only, I mean, work with the local communities, but also to kind of like return the information that we kind of like gather to the local communities and do this sharing of local knowledge that we usually do through workshops or through doing some materials that can be shared with the local communities. So we kind of like establish a more dynamic relation, like telling them the results of our studies. Now, this has been the standard until recently. Now, in the recent years, I mean, there has been voices of many local communities and indigenous communities raising on how how science is a very kind of like top-down way of like this, like some people say, oh, you return us the knowledge, but the knowledge is us. So what are you returning to us, right? I mean, we gave you that knowledge, and so what are you now? So we are, I mean, in our group, but also in general in the discipline, there are new ways that are developing that go from establishing more or horizontal dialogues, having partnerships with local institutions. Now you cannot, I mean, you can, of course you can, but it's just like not ethical to develop research in other countries in the global south without involving a local institution, without having partnerships with the research communities, and also in many cases also involving in a more direct way local communities when this is possible in designing or in helping shape what are the questions that we are asking so they are relevant for them. This is not very evident from an institutional or scientific point of view, because we receive money from, let's say, the European Union, and then the grants say you have to do this in 3 years, what's your idea, and finish, no? And local communities have different times, no? You have to establish relationships, and so it's not evident how to do it, but just to say that the way in which the scientific relation with local communities is evolving has changed much in the last, let's say, 10 or 20 years in the sense of at least trying to recognize local scientific institutions locally in the countries where we work, but also these other stakeholder knowledge holders. So that's what we are trying, but I think at the university level in Europe and at the European level, the people who give us the money to do research, this is still not standard. So sometimes we face problems, administrative issues of like, why do you want to do that? Or yeah. So I don't know if the others wants to share other perspectives, no, on this.
Yes, Lucas Yamat.
Yeah, thank you. I think Victoria talked a lot about the knowledge sharing, but I just want to add other ways of sharing knowledge. One is about the short videos or documentaries where you document the local knowledge and scientific knowledge and share with local communities in maybe a CD-ROM or films in the field. But also in my previous project, we also used local elders experience sharing and elders talk series that they talk about the pressing issues that face their communities and also propose some solutions. So that is really something that we cannot do, but in the global perspective, we can also use scientific journals or publications And also we present different findings of research to big conference or whatever conference Victoria mentioned, workshop and dialogue with policymakers. And the kind of documentation, we can also have a simple illustrative policy briefs that contain important information that any person can use without a problem. So those are the kind of tools that we use to share knowledge with the community.
So I think Dr. Ken also, he has some thoughts about knowledge sharing. Please, Dr. Ken, go ahead.
I share it on the chat, so people can have access. What I would just want to say briefly is knowledge sharing is easier when we co-define, co-execute, co-develop innovation with communities. So therefore, they are part of the knowledge. They have access to the knowledge because they co-generated with us. So even if the researcher or the energy is left, they have the knowledge with them. So we don't need somebody come up to teach them again the community. And also the researcher also learn a lot from the communities. So people always think about there's a one-way situation. No, we design our project because we learn and we come up to the communities and try to see how we can push a bottom to move ahead. So people think, so it's a two-way. We learn from them and they also can take some innovation from us. So, and I put in the chat more details on how we do it in Senegal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ken. I don't know if maybe NARRIMAN wants to share her experience of knowledge sharing in her university or VANESSE, or I don't know if any of the other panelists, they want to share their opinion about this.
Yes, I can share some of my experience. So I think that definitely this issue of sharing knowledge between different types of actors and scholars is very important. So in my research group, we have been working on developing tools for participation and knowledge sharing for a long time now. And it is based on like what we call companion modeling, which is to represent the functioning of a system and the issue at stake together with the different stakeholders. And then developing interactive tools like role-playing games that are serious games that represent this situation and that allow the different stakeholders to discuss and share ideas and look for solutions about particular problems and issues. And we are also using a lot of different tools like forum theater and other kind of participatory tools that are really efficient to share knowledge between different types of stakeholders and discuss about difficult and complex management issues about natural resource in particular. So this is something I can add.
Thank you, Dr. LABEYRIE. I don't know if Dr. Jiddawi wants to add something at the University of Dar es Salaam. Maybe she's not there. She's not listening to us. No problem. We have more questions. By the way, we are about to think about your questions because soon I will ask you. I have a last one, which actually it was a question by Victoria previously, and it's a question for. I think Dr. Jiddawi is back. She's there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now, yes.
Yeah. So I was saying that we have exchange knowledge between community and ourselves. For example, when we want to learn to go to to talk to them, we have to know what time they go fishing or what time they collect shells, for example, the women. So this is from the lunar calendar. Also, we have to know the tidal times. We also have to know what type of base they use to catch specific fish. we are learning all this information from the community. And also when we have some information we want to share with a lot, we do small workshops, small trainings, and even radio and TV programs to portray information which they can use in conservation efforts or learning new techniques on marine resources. Thank you. Did you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, yes. Thank you, Dr. Jiddawi. Before we couldn't hear now perfectly. We all got your statement. Thank you very much. And I will also, I don't want to lose the opportunity to ask this question to Dr. Ken. The question is actually by Victoria. She's asking, what is the ISRA strategy to engage with local stakeholders? And I think also, if the rest of you want to develop on this on your own institution, was your strategy to engage with local stakeholders? That would be nice. But I think this was addressed to NDJIDO, so please go ahead.
Okay, but usually, as I said, our research are driven by the demand of the stakeholders. I will give you an example. Recently, what we have done, we convey all the stakeholders of one value chain, all actors, women, private sector, and we discuss about showing them the innovations that we have, and also they share about their concerns, the solutions, the difficulties that they face. And together we define what we call a breeding product profile. What are the profile of products that they need? Beginning, we ask them, what do you need? And what type of solution, I mean, you expect from us? And we show them the tools that we have in our hands that can contribute to that. And together we try to conduct research with them in their environment. First, all the tested variety testing that we are doing, we're doing with them. So we keep the engagement always. It's not something that we develop and give it to them. No, we do it with them. We call it there is a concept we call MVP. What viable product we have to give to one stakeholders, so he is interested in the product. He's engaged on following the development. So this is a new approach. I will give an example of a bottle of water. You want to drink, I give you a bottle of water. Is it a full bottle of water? No. Water. So now it's full. You want a cup that is blue. Okay, I change the cup that was red. I give you a cup that is blue. So step by step, with you, trying to give you what you need. So I will keep your engagement all the way the process of developmental of an example of how we keep the community engaged. And at the end, we follow with them. Are you making benefit? We give you. Are we entering your question, your concern, your needs? So it's a back and forth, a continued process that is dynamic. It's over. So this is an example of how we give them engaged, and we make sure that these are inclusive and these are also beneficial to all the stakeholders of the value chain.
Okay, I think we had some problems with the connection, but thank you. And now we got almost everything. So thank you very much, Dr. Ken. I think Victoria raised her hand, and if you don't mind, Victoria, after you, we'll go to NARRIMAN because she's writing some of the answers about that they also involve local communities. So we go to Victoria, and then we'll go to NARRIMAN.
No, I just wanted to kind of like emphasize or comment or reflect on the fact that there are many ways, in which every different institution share or try to engage or relate with the local people. But I think one aspect that it's common in all them are that, I mean, we all that work with local communities kind of like see as critical is the fact that we need to have the trust of the community, that we need to establish long-term relationships with local communities if we really want to make an impact, if we really want to develop this, if we want them to tell us, these are my needs, you cannot just go there in a weekend or like over 2 days and say, okay, what do you want? And because I mean, this doesn't work, right? I mean, it's a different type of relationship that has to be established. And just I mean, I think this is something that all of us here who have worked with local communities are very conscious, but I just wanted to reflect on how this is so different to what is expected from us from the scientific perspective, right? Because from the scientific world, that what is expected is that you publish quickly, that you kind of like have more projects, and sometimes they don't even consider retributions to communities, or they don't consider how, I mean, this process of involving communities, no, it has to be research driven. So just to reflect on this idea of that the engagement with the local communities or local stakeholders, it can also be policymakers, right? It doesn't have to be the communities, any local stakeholder. These are things that takes a lot of time, and the research strategy, like in Europe, is not designed considering that. It's designed thinking on number of papers, number of PhD that you produce, right? And sometimes this is a constraint for doing this kind of I mean, going deeper or longer in establishing these relations.
Thank you, Dr. Reyes Garcia. Thank you very much. And Dr. Jiddawi, you are there. You were discussing about the.
Maybe I just want to say a little bit that we normally work with communities, and we give them our knowledge, and they give us theirs. So we exchange. We know, as I said, from books, but they know based on the environment they live. For example, when we want to establish no-take zones in one area in Zanzibar at Fumba, we have to go to them, we need to talk to them, get the information, where there are best sites, and then we continue with our activities. So there is a need to have collaboration between scientists and communities who have the indigenous knowledge. Thank you.
Asante. So we have 20 minutes to go, so I think it's a good moment to open the floor for questions. Do you have questions here? There's a question here in the audience. We have a very good audience today. Eh? It's a very good audience. And I have another question on YouTube, which I would read later, but firstly, and there's 2 questions actually. 3 questions. Okay. I ask, sorry. They will ask a question, please. We go straight for the answer, panelists, because we want everyone to be able to ask their questions. Please go ahead.
Perfect. I just want to say first, thanks to everyone for sharing all of their thoughts with us today. Really, really grateful for that. My question is quite broad, just hoping for maybe some type of reflection, and it's also influenced by my personal research. And the question for me is that although Sub-Saharan Africa is still a majority rural continent, for me, the contemporary African world is increasingly urban. And so I was just wondering if any of you could reflect on the role that the urban or mass rural urban migration plays in your research, or how you see it playing out in the African context.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe you could reformulate somehow, because it was difficult to catch, I think, the whole question.
No, I think that the question, sorry, was that we have focused on the rural Africa, but Africa has moved now. I mean, there is this trend to urbanize, no? So what is our perspective on the fact that now there are bigger cities the cities are growing in Africa, and how this issue of food security and climate change is affecting?
Yes, this is really also a good question of even research. Because of migration, people left the rural area and came to cities. This engendered a cause, like I can give 2 examples. First, the cities that do not necessarily have something to eat, because the country is not anyway. The workforce in the rural area move from to the cities. So this means that the food systems are threatened because of the lack of workforce. And second is this also a change in food consuming. The consumer evolved. It's not the same than before. It means that also the food system have to address the needs of these new consumers. So these are 2 examples of the of migration in the food systems. But this need also to be, documented and also say some research conducted to try to understand what are the drivers, that cause this, and what are the consequences also in the society in general. I not it very well, but I hope I bring some questions.
Okay, we're having some issues, NDJIDO, for your connection is a bit slow, so we lost some bits. Maybe next time you can maybe turn the camera off so we can also only have the sound, because there was some issue with this. But I think Lucas Yamato also wanted to speak about this.
Yeah, thank you. The growth of cities, actually, or towns, if you like, they have impact on food security issues, because some jobless people can also move to town, as Ken said, and that can have a problem on the local labor force who produce enough food for consumers. But also you can look that as in a different way, that maybe the growth of towns can also take a part of the fertile land that was used for food production, and then it blocks, let's say it was a migratory routes for wildlife or livestock, or it was a farming area, and then the food production system can also get threatened. But if we will be pessimistic about this, we can also see the growth of cities as an opportunity to increase the markets for local production. So it can have both positive or challenges and opportunities at the same time. Yeah.
It's a very good point. Yes. Dr. VANESSE LABEYRIE, I think she wanted to speak also.
Yes, for instance, one very concrete example we have from our research, especially in Senegal, is that the increase in urbanization creates a huge demand for fresh products like vegetables. And so in many areas, we can see that there is this increase in the production of horticultural crop. And so in some cases, it raises some issues about climate adaptation, because farmers see this as a way to adapt to the decrease of rainfall, because it's an irrigated crop. But over long term, this may conduct to problems about water and depletion of water resource. And this is observed already in some areas. So for sure, this issue of urbanization has huge impacts on agriculture and raise new issues also about climate adaptation, both new perspective, but also new constraints and dangers.
Thank you. I think very complete answer for a very good question. So I think we have another question here, right? And another behind, but before we go here, then there, then behind.
Hola. Sí. Yes, thank you very much for the very interesting discussion. I have a question about climate finance. And so supposing the reparations for loss and damage do come, and for example, what was agreed in the at the COP26, those $100 billion for the global South countries to adapt to climate change. I wanted to hear from you, what mechanisms do you think could be put in place so that this money gets to the hands of those who need it the most, and so that it supports really local communities, pastoral communities, and these relational aspects that you discussed, and so that it doesn't end up being controlled by private banks or private enterprises who have historically accumulated this capital. So what mechanisms can be put in place so that the funds that hopefully come can actually end up at the hands of those who need it the most?
Anyone?
Boy, if we had the answer to that question, we wouldn't be here. we would be more in the international negotiations. But I think it is a very important point, right? Because now for the first time, the COP have decided to give or to invest all this money into the local populations, and the issue now is how is this gonna get there? I guess countries are gonna be getting organized. And I imagine that one of the important things is going to be to have organizations that are accountable for how this money is spent. Again, the main issue that we are going to be facing here is how the global institutions, it's similar to what I was saying before about the relationship between science and local communities. The global institutions wants the money to be accounted for in certain ways that are transparent and accountable, etc., which are much beyond the capacities or the way of functioning of local communities, right? So I think that there is going to be need for a lot of intermediaries. I don't have a straight answer on how you on that question, but I think that there's going to be a need for local intermediaries, and then the hope, as in all these processes, is that the money does not stay in doing the bureaucracy of kind of like getting that money to, so 50% of the money stays in the organization that needs to do the paperwork, and only 10% gets to the people. No? So it's going to be a challenge, and it's good that the question is put before the money, it's on the tables. But sorry, I didn't answer you very well, but I think I just acknowledge that this is an important consideration. But maybe Lucas has the answer.
All right, thank you. That's a very critical question, and is a hard one because, the funding are maybe given to the government, and the government have to make sure that the investment is going down to the local community. But I can, of course, join you, Victoria, saying that the connection between the higher government, the central government, and the local government and the community is crucial in this aspect. But this needs to be reinforced by criteria of having these funds, because maybe the government have a lot of priorities, and they can take the money and invest in cities and forget about the rural communities. But we understand that in the Paris Agreement, they have the nationally determined contributions to climate change, and they have some specific activities that are local community centered, and that money need to go really in those aspects to support adaptation and mitigation to climate change. And in the global south, of course, the adaptation is a more priority, and the local communities, those who are in fragile environment like the pastoralists, the fisheries communities, and also the smallholder farmers are the one who need the most of that money to adapt to the changing climate. So systems need to be there to guide the use of that money, and it should really go down to the rural producers. But yeah, it is a hard one because we researchers, we generate knowledge, but we don't manage the funds, but we can advise the government in those aspects that this will be a good pathway to achieve sustainability through the climate financing systems and something like that. But also we understand that a lot of pledges has been met, but still we have a gap. We haven't yet met the 100 billion in pledges, because we are in 79 as of today, and we almost 800, and 200 is still, or 20 billions dollars is still pending as a gap to reach the target. So we need also some push from the negotiators to have and between the two blocks, the Global South and Global North, to have this kind of cooperation. And cooperation is really needed at the international level and also at local level to make sure that the funding is used effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucas. It's a big question. What is the money? It's a big question. We have another question here, I think. No, it was here? Yes. We still have 8 minutes. We need to be punctual. So,
well, thank you for the discussion. My question was on pastoralism, and I was wondering if a higher temperature will probably lead to more dry land area, especially in Africa. And as the lecturer mentioned, the pastoralism is one of the best ways to manage these lands. Does it mean there is a more important role for pastoralism in the future? And is this also acknowledged, or are they working on it? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, pastoralism. Yeah, that's a big question too. But yes, the climate system has been changing over time, and we can, because in previous years, we don't have systematic records of the climate system, how the climate system has been behaving. But pastoralist has been adapting to these changes through mobility, but only if we have a smooth kind of mobility pathways to move from one area to another. And we normally use evidence from Spain, because they have established and secured those pathways that the livestock can move between the lowland and the highlands in different time period. But it is a bit complicated because it is rooted on the land use systems, and that land use system has been changing over time, and the policies on land use is really not much stronger. So some other policies can water down everything that is put there to support the mobility. If mobility is to be killed, then the pastoral system will perish, and we will move to zero grazing or kind of intensive livestock keeping, which have also a big impact to environment and livelihood of people. So yeah, we need actually policies to consider this local knowledge that have extensive experience in managing dry land, moving from where there is a severe drought to where there is a little rains. Because if land use policies restricted the movement from one point, let's say from between 2 points is 2 kilometers apart, and you can't just move to the next village because is restricted by policy, or the land use practices has blocked the pathways, then you are done. So I think those policies also need to consider that kind of dynamics in the ecosystems, and also the local knowledge that they have been using for years, not only to pastoralists, but to fisheries communities and crop growers. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. I think we still have 4 minutes. We can have a last question here, no? There was a question here, right? Yes.
Yes. Thank you for your presentations, all of you, and interesting discussions. The network, the relational network system that one of the panelists mentioned, yeah, it is very, very important in Africa, because that is a medium in which farmers share knowledge and other farming activities. But my worry is, how do we know that this knowledge that they share is good or is going to cope the effect of climate change? For example, you talked about seed sharing. How are we sure that the seeds that are sharing are certified good seeds, are tolerant to climate change, will increase their productivity, and maybe in the long run increase income to be able to cope food security? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. So indeed, there is a broad idea that is broadly diffused among decision makers and development agencies that farmers' seed are not good quality seed and are poorly performing. But in fact, this is a kind of rational myth in the because there is so far no real scientific assessment of that, because local seeds are also locally bred and adapted. Then indeed, there are also varieties that are bred by professional breeders or also by research institutes that can perform very well and that can be better adapted also to future conditions. So what I see is that what is really important is the diversity of seeds that farmers can get, and to enhance their ability to access to these different types of seeds, to get the local seeds, but also to access to seed cultivated by other farmers in other areas, and to get access to seeds bred by research institute and so on. And what is really important is that to give them the choice and the opportunity to select what is more adapted to their local condition and needs. So yeah, that would be, in my opinion, what is most important.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer, Dr. LABEYRIE, and thank you for the question from the audience. Only because we have also some questions from YouTube, it will be very fast. If the rector allows us, we'll do the last question. I think we can do it together. These are two questions, but they both refer to local communities. So one of them, it says, I wonder if local communities can accept technology to improve the efficiency of farming, seeds from genetic modification or gene editing. Although some of these products cannot be suitable for export, it could be approved at national level. And the other one, it relates to local communities. It says, my concern is a lot of research on production pastoral, to mention one, and the issues of CC are being done. It's a bit okay. The challenge is taking back the findings of the local community. What needs to be done? So regarding these two questions, if one of you want to comment, it's most welcome. And with this, we will say goodbye for today.
Maybe I can just comment on the first one, and also as a closing intervention, that, I mean, of course, local communities can accept innovations, and this is the whole point that at least I wanted to emphasize on this idea of dialogue between knowledge systems, right? Science, scientific agricultural development, research on pastoralism, fisheries, on biologists, all this research that we do, it's valuable. And also it's the knowledge that local people have is valuable. But what will be even more valuable is to put these two kind of like knowledge systems in dialogue to generate the new knowledge that we need to face the challenges that we are facing. And what we are missing is more ways to kind of like put this knowledge into dialogue without undervaluing one or the other, without thinking, oh, science is foreign imposition or local knowledge is something from the past. So yeah, over.
Okay, so I think no one wants to. Okay, I think we're right on time, so we'll leave it here. It was great. Thank you very much, all the panelists. This was great discussion. Thank you very much for the audience, great audience, both online and here. I'm very thrilled to see all these questions, all this interest on the issue of climate change and food security. So this is great. And for the closure, we will ask the rector of the Autonomous University of Barcelona, Javier Lafuente. So thank you very much, rector, and of course the floor is yours.
Thank you. dear friends and colleagues. It is my pleasure to close this third session on the series of seminars that Alliance for Universities is doing across the contemporary African world. I have been informed that the session has been inspirational and fruitful. Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona, as part of the A4U, is really interested and committed with the dialogue with our African partners and colleagues, and with the collaboration that must be done between researchers from African universities and organizations and our universities and research centers. Unfortunately, the pandemic has slowed down for a period the missions to African universities, which are the starting point of a series of activities such as the reverse mission and the increase and boosting of multilateral and bilateral projects of mutual interest. The dialogue, the third of a series of 4, has added another dimension to the database and issues that concerns us almost. Security food is in a climate change environmental, and you have had the opportunity of knowing about the issue from the forefront of the research and innovation in this field. Research, there is much to do, but we are showing our willingness to increase our shared activities with African researchers and universities, and I am sure that this event has contributed to do it. I hope that this session is going to be, together with the other 3, a milestone in our activity with African universities. Hopefully, we have made a step forward to reshaping the dialogue with the contemporary African world. I would like to thank you the keynote speaker, NDJIDO KANE from Senegal, and also VANESSE from Montpellier, NARRIMAN SALEH-JIDDAWI from Zanzibar, Tanzania, Lucas Yamat from Basque Country, and our ISRA researcher Victoria Reyes from their contribution, and also for all to all the participants. Thank you very much for the attendance and participation, and a warm greeting for greeting to all of our colleagues' participation online, and also to those on the campus. I'm sorry. All my best wishes to translate the commitment into projects and new synergies. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. And I hope this seminar and this journey was very helpful for everyone.